Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Famiboards Discussion Club, a podcast for and by the Famiboards community. Today we'll be discussing our thoughts on the Game Awards 2023, as well as the recent announcement of a live-action Legend of Zelda film. If you'd like to get in on the discussion as well, please be sure to swing by this podcast companion thread on Famiboards.com. I'm WestEgg, and I'm once again joined by Irene.
Coming at you from a full week of having a throat sickness, so if my throat is sounding itchy or scratchy, that's why.
And VolcanicDynamo.
You know, given how much I've been oversleeping lately, maybe they should cast me to play Link in the movie. Just a thought.
Alright, so before we get into the main topics, I did want to open with a question we did receive from Meatbag, which is a bit related, which reads, since we're talking about the Game Awards, what was your Game of the Year this year that was not part of the Game Awards nominees?
I mean, Metroid Prime Remastered is like my second favorite game of the year after Tears of the Kingdom, but it's the remaster question if it counts or doesn't count, because I think that if they had a remaster category at the Game Awards, Metroid Prime would probably be there, I hope and suppose, because it deserves it with every fiber of the being that it has. But yeah, some of my it has been quite similar actually, how my TGA lineups with the Game of Awards TGA, but it's definitely a Fashion Dreamer that is my answer to the question, because I love that game a lot, and yeah, it would have been cool to see it shout outed in some way at some kind of award, but it's not a very award friendly game, which is a bit unfortunate.
That's fair, but I do love that answer. What about you, VolcanicDynamo?
Part of my problem is that I actually didn't play a lot of new games in 2023. I played a lot of old games. I think, how many times on this podcast have I mentioned that I haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom? But, which means that I'm left in a predicament where the only new-ish game that I've played that hasn't been nominated for a Game Award is the Super Mario RPG remake, because I still haven't even gotten to Prime Remastered. But yeah, that's been a really good remake. I've been really enjoying it. It's actually my first time significantly progressing through Super Mario RPG and not like quitting halfway through when you're playing on virtual consoles like a teenager. So been having a lot of fun with that. And special shout out to Yoko Shimomura, not only her original soundtrack, but the incredible arrangements. Honestly, that could have won Best Soundtrack this year, and I wouldn't even bat it, and I would not have batted an eye. It's really is that good.
Okay, that's fair.
Yoko Shimomura deserves all the shout-outs in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the rework of the Forest Maze theme, which was already great. They added like some new instrumentation to it that I really enjoyed. They made a Boosters theme like more ritzy sounding, which I thought was kind of cool. All around, I really enjoyed that soundtrack.
Yeah. I can't believe she managed to make Forest Maze into more of a Yoko Shimomura song than it already is. That's incredible.
Yeah. So as far as what I would consider my non-Game Awards Game of the Year, the answer I want to give that I wish I could give is Octopath Traveler 2. But I just haven't been able to play that much of it. Like, I've only played the first chapters of, like, I think 6 of the characters, and just things keep coming up and I keep getting away from it. So that's the game that I most want to have be my Game of the Year, but I can't justify it. If we are considering remakes or ports or remasters, it might be Ghost Trick. I've been
Cool.
I'm getting towards the end of that, and I'm really enjoying it. I don't know if either of you ever played it.
I played it.
Okay.
It's a really, really good game. It is. I played it on mobile, and how it works with the touching was really cool. And you know, as a fan of those kinds of games, yeah, it's a really good game. I really like it.
Yeah, it's one of those games that really escalates towards the end, which makes sense. It's by the creator of Ace Attorney,
yeah.
And I really loved especially the Great Ace Attorney, and that also escalates like it just goes nuts towards the end. So I'm looking forward to finishing it. I'll probably finish it in like the next week or so. And then if we're not considering the remasters or the ports or whatever, this did receive an award, but it wasn't a Game of the Year nominee. It would be Pikmin 4.
Good choice. Good choice.
Yeah, Pikmin 4 was just delightful from beginning to end.
What category did it win?
Best simulation or strategy.
Because I remember in the thread that's my attention shifted for a little bit, and all of a sudden everyone was cheering for Pikmin 4, and I thought that was cool. I was like, Pikmin 4 won something. That's awesome.
Yeah, so speaking of the things that did win at the Game Awards, how did you both feel about just the award selections in general? Like, what was nominated, what actually ended up winning, and in its respective categories? Do you think they did a good job, at least in that aspect of the show?
I guess you should probably talk about the elephant in the room, which was who won Game of the Year, which is, it's a good choice. Not only were all 6 of the games released this year really good, but Baldur's Gate 3, I haven't played it yet, but from everything I've seen of it, from everything I've heard people talk about it, it's a pretty dang good game. So I think at least in that regard, the 6 choices for Game of the Year were pretty standard and for the most part pretty expected. I guess we can find it amusing that Starfield didn't make the cut, but I mean, looking at everything else that was in that slot, I mean, you got 6 high-performing, critically acclaimed games over here. So like, I don't really know. Like, besides personal taste, I'm not sure what I would like swap in and out there. So I think that category was at least pretty solid, right?
Yeah, I would agree. The 6 that were there, I can't argue against any of them being there. I would say the things that may have been surprising that they didn't quite make the cut could be Street Fighter 6. I know that had a lot of good reception around it. Maybe Final Fantasy 16, although I know that kind of had its ups and downs and whatnot. But I can't argue against any of those or the eventual winner. As far as Baldur's Gate goes, I have played it a bit. I've started like 2 different characters and played a few hours on each, which is kind of just barely scratching the scope of the game. But it also didn't quite grip me in the way that I think it did other people. So it is ultimately like a choice I can accept, a thing I'm like, I've got no regrets or whatever about it winning. I would say Tears of the Kingdom was still my probably personal game of the year, but again, it's kind of what I expected.
Yeah, it was interesting to me because, I mean, first of all, this year has been incredible. Like, I look at my personal top 10, and like half of my top 10 are all masterpieces. So it's like incredible. But it's interesting to me because it has been a lot of consistent consensus where I've noticed in a lot of Game of the Year lists that the Game Awards selection of 6 games has been pretty unanimous alongside other outlets' awards. You have like, Tears of the Kingdom won here, Alan Wake won here, and Baldur's Gate won here, and then Alan Wake won again, and then Tears of the Kingdom won again. So it's, in that case, I think like the recognition of those 6 that ended up being nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards seemed to be a pretty fair selection. And although like you can make a point that all of them are sequels of some sort, and one of them is I talked earlier about they don't have a remaster category, but they still put remakes in the Game of the Year, so that's something. So I think that when it comes to like general recognition of quality, I can't like argue against that. It was a pretty great year and a pretty fine selection that made the cut.
Yeah.
And go on.
I thought it was kind of cool to see how much recognition Alan Wake in particular got. I know a lot of people weren't even sure it would make the Game of the Year nominees with kind of how stacked this year was, but I think it won almost everything it was nominated for aside from Game of the Year itself. It does seem to be that kind of game, like, I mean, it literally stars a writer. It seems like it would appeal to kind of the people that would be voting on this, but it was cool to see.
I'm playing Alan Wake 2 now, and I'm spellbound by it. I'm absolutely spellbound by it. It's incredible. I'm only like 3 or 4 hours in, but I'm still having my mind blown once every 2 seconds, I think.
It's pretty notable that like everyone I've seen talk about this about Alan Wake 2, from you, Irene, to any other critic or just casual player who's been really enjoying the game, has like incredible things to say about it. Even though it's not the game that sold the most this year comparatively, I think its whole digital only thing might have gotten like a little bit of those sales numbers taken away. But even beyond that, everyone I've seen talk about Alan Wake 2 is in love with Alan Wake 2. Like you said before, it just goes to show how stacked of a year 2023 is. In many regards, it's like it's very much like 2017 was. Great games made by a ton of different studios, being released now all at the same time, and us just being able to enjoy the fruits of all that hard work.
Yeah, and what's cool about it is that no one really knew how stacked it would be at the beginning when it came to Game of the Year, because the sentiment I saw was like, Game of the Year, Zelda sweep, Zelda sweep, Zelda sweep, and then Zelda got some pretty fierce competition. So even though I personally was like, maybe rooting is the wrong word, but personally would have been happy to see Zelda Tears of the Kingdom win, I wasn't let down by it, because it was a really worthy set of nominees as far as I'm concerned.
So kind of an indication of how strong this year was. One of the Game of the Year nominees, Spider-Man 2, was nominated for 7 awards. It did not walk away with any of them.
Yeah.
And my understanding is, it's like a really strong game. There were just other games that excelled more in those areas.
And I'm also glad, but speaking of Tears of the Kingdom, I'm also glad about, because people talk about snubs and stuff. And I think Tears of the Kingdom getting nominated for Best Soundtrack was like this year's big anti-snub. And seeing an anti-snub is always cool, because I know it's a reused soundtrack from Breath of the Wild with like 90% or 80% or 70% of the songs being very similar or straight up the same. But some of the new arrangements and some of the brand new songs they brought in are, to me, just absolutely incredible chef's kiss moments in that games that are... The music carries a lot of the most emotional parts of that game, so...
it's more musical than Breath of the Wild was, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even like the cutscene music, which is like... in Breath of the Wild, it was like, it's cutscene music, but in Tears of the Kingdom, the cutscene music really carries a lot of the scenes and hits at very precise moments. As far as my personal, like, happy moment of like, yes, it's cool to see that recognized, it was that soundtrack nomination.
I will call snub on Octopath Traveler 2.
Okay,
as far as soundtrack goes, because the first Octopath Traveler, regardless of like whether people like the story or whatever, it had a phenomenal soundtrack. It had like one of my favorite like RPG soundtracks ever. And from what I've heard of what I played of Octopath 2, it's just like even better. So, but that's like the only thing I can really think of that like I was like, oh man, this was left out. All right, so I think we've dedicated enough time to the awards themselves. We have to move things on to what matters. So let's talk about all the announcements, all of the trailers, everything that Geoff loves.
Everything that Geoff loves.
So there actually were quite a few announcements in the show, which, again, is kind of the point. And there were a few that did stand out to me that I really liked. They had opened the show with Pony Island 2. Or actually, that was the second announcement. And have either of you played the first Pony Island?
No. I have played the first Pony Island. It is bonkers.
It's really good. Like it's one of those games where I'm like, just go into it blind. Like don't look up anything about it, and play it and just enjoy it.
Yeah, that was a very out of left field, a very welcoming left field announcement, because it's unexpected, but it's really cool because it's from Daniel Mullins made Pony Island, and it was like really incredible. Then he made Inscription, which like became like a smash hit not a smash hit, more like a cult smash hit. he feels to me like a very consistent developer that's never or like knows what he's doing and has a very distinct style. So I'm definitely keeping my eyes on Pony Island too.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that Sungwon Show gets to keep making that money, and keep appearing and stuff. Because seeing him in this trailer as a live action character is kind of just like throwing me off, but in the best possible way. And I guess that's kind of the vibe of what Pony Island is going for in general. So congrats, job well done. Very, very interesting looking game.
And it's interesting, the first game did not have voice acting or, I believe, any like live action footage. So that's kind of going to be a new departure, which the game's kind of has a lot of disparate elements anyway that's kind of meant to surprise and subvert or whatever. So I'm looking forward to however they implement that. That was one of the smaller announcements. They did a bunch of smaller announcements kind of in the pre-show. So you had like Pony Island 2, some of the ones that kind of stood out to me. We had Harmonium the Musical, where the main character is deaf and like all the songs and whatnot are signed, and that's kind of an interesting concept to me. They showed Thrasher, which looked like a VR sequel to Thumper, and that could be fun. They kind of just packed a lot. They had like a DLC which had like a roguelite for God of War Ragnarok. Again, all pretty interesting stuff. Did anything stand out to you kind of among those kind of like rapid fire pre-show announcements?
I think Harmonium just straight up as a concept is just really, really incredible. We don't really get to see a lot of, or at least in depth when it comes to things with people with like disabilities, different accessibility levels. So to have a game that takes untouchable concept, this is about music, but it stars a deaf character who speaks in the sign language, and that being shown very deliberately and very carefully throughout the game. That alone just piques my interest, even if I don't not to play a lot of rhythm or adventure kind of games. But it also just looks really creative and that on a visual point, so I'll definitely be like at the very least looking out for it as we learn more about it.
I will say the Big Walk, which was by the developers of Untitled Goose Game, also caught my attention solely because the developers of Untitled Goose Game.
I think that's that's definitely fair to say, because they've for sure earned their reputation like tenfold. A lot of the devs who have gotten the chance to showcase a game at the Game Awards from big companies, and particularly a lot of the smaller devs, have definitely like earned them. And whatever I have to say about the awards and the show itself, I am really happy that we get a lot of these smaller teams getting to show off their games on such a big scale,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely gonna get Big Walk again after how good Untitled Goose Game was. House has earned my goodwill. I will almost certainly be getting this game as soon as it comes out.
So I think, I believe these were also part of the pre-show, but just some other things that looked interesting. There was No Rest for the Wicked, which is by the Ori devs. And then we saw some trailers for Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor Re-Fantasio. And then I think that's when the show had actually started. I liked what they did with some of the reveals or new trailers where they, like with Hellblade 2 and then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it was accompanied by like an orchestral performance. And both of those I thought were very well done.
Oh, they went hard. They went hard.
Like the Hellblade 2 one, there was like a whole fire show. People were in costume. It was just really awesome.
Yeah, I love it when they do like that.
And then with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that was like a huge dive into the game. Like they showed a new trailer, I'm pretty sure. And then they did this whole performance. They had... The singer had been kind of dressed like Aerith. It was like really elaborate, really beautiful.
That game is making my wallet cry so hard.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is?
Yeah, exactly. It's like after 3 years at long last my life has been greeted with a reason to buy a PS5, which is like a blessing and a curse because it's a cool reason to get a PS5 because it's a freaking incredible looking game, but it also has me like Googling like PS5 price in Sweden, and then my mood sinks through the floor.
You might also need to look up PS5 SSD prices in Sweden because that game's going to take up a lot of space on that SSD.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As far as Final Fantasy goes, like, I've never been able to get into the series despite really wanting to. And it's kind of funny, like, despite that, I'm reasonably familiar with Final Fantasy VII and the characters and the story and, like, everything else about it. It's just, I don't think you can be involved with, like, internet gaming culture for decades without kind of absorbing the plot and, like, everything that else it's about. So it's just, it does seem like a really significant game coming next year. If I ever do get into the series, I do want to play these games eventually.
Yeah, me too. My hope is that one of my things that I want to do is, especially now that I have the more of the time to play it, I want to play the original Final Fantasy VII. I've actually only ever played Final Fantasies 1 through 4. I've only done parts of 5. I haven't touched 6, but I want to at least do 7. Then I want to play 7 Remake, and then I want to try 7 Rebirth. Will that mean I play Rebirth in 2024? Maybe. I hope. Maybe not at launch, but I hope. But I think that would be really cool because I want to see what people are talking about. And I liked playing Final Fantasies 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm sure that with practice, with the job system, I'll love 5. And I'm sure with just acclimating to how the mechanics are, I'll enjoy 6. And the jump from 6 to 7 mechanically isn't like that wild, even though we go from 2D to 3D. So doing that and then being able to play... playing the remake and Rebirth, I think will be cool, and I'll finally be able to see all of those characters from Kingdom Hearts in their original game.
Final Fantasy VII holds up really, really well as far as I'm concerned. Like, technically, maybe not, but the soundtrack still slaps into oblivion, and the theme and story and characters are... It's one of those kinds of games where the story material and the narrative material and the thematic material still goes deep enough that it is still something that is relatable and impactful, that it sort of shines through the age. Not entirely unlike how Ocarina of Time can still push through and feel relevant and impactful today, despite it being a really, really old game. I think those two are very good, kind of similar examples in timelessness.
That's
just
cool.
making me look forward to it more.
Yay.
So there were 2 announcements that kind of threw me for a loop that I had not been expecting. One was a release date for Skull and Crossbones.
Oh, you
Like that game, that is like the modern like Duke Nukem Forever, just like the game that is always in development and will never release, with just wild stories like how it's now like tied up in funding with the government of Singapore or something.
Yeah, it hurts my heart a little bit because I feel so bad for those devs who have like crunched on it so hard and put a lot of effort into it. So obviously that is very sad about the story, but it's so like it feels like to me that's a bit of like a schoolbook example of everything that is wrong with AAA gaming in terms of like how to not manage a project, at least from the stories that I've picked up from like articles and stuff. That
seems like it's just kind of been the last decade of Ubisoft in general.
Yeah, it has really bogged them down significantly with the way that project has been like ballooning. So, but it is kind of like unreal to see a release date for like the most vaporware game that has ever vaporwared.
I mean, just in time to compete with what Assassin's Creed 4 and Sea of Thieves and all the other games it was supposed to go up against.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Ubisoft's Sea of Thieves killer, and it's a bit late to the party for that.
So that was one game that like really surprised me when they saw it. The other was when they brought out the developers of No Man's Sky, and they're making another game, Light No Fire, which seems to be like a fantasy Earth generator or something. And it was hilarious going online because basically everyone was like, no, don't promise beyond your scope to deliver, don't do it again.
Yeah, when they said the word like more ambitious, that to me kind of like made my stomach knot a little bit, because they are an indie studio after all, and the scope creep is a pretty real thing in game development that can have consequences if you don't reel it in. So I wish, like, Hello Games, I have respect for them, and I wish best of luck to them. But just that moment, I understand what you mean. Just that moment where Sean Murray was standing there and was like, "Yeah, more ambitious." I had to draw a deep breath.
You could definitely say that they've tried to learn lessons from No Man's Sky's pre-release. I mean, first off, at the very least, I will say, hey, even though I haven't played No Man's Sky, they did a very admirable job, cleaning up the game and not only getting it to the state that they promised, but going even further.
Absolutely.
So I feel like, to an extent, yeah, they have earned back a lot of their, at least enough of their goodwill where they can pull a move like this. Another thing is, hey, yeah, what are they showing here primarily? In-engine footage with UI to show that there's something. Also, another notable thing in this trailer that I'm looking over here, what do we not have? A release date. It's happening. We're making it, but we're not saying when. We're not rushing it. It's just happening. Here's a peek. It might come out next year. It might come out in 2 years, maybe even 3 years, but we're making it. That's at least allows things to be measured a little bit. Because we don't have to be thinking about, oh, when is this game going to come out? Oh, it's coming out next year. I hope they have it finished. They're making it. It looks potentially appealing. Let them take their time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So, you know what game was announced with, like, all the pomp and circumstance in the world and has not stuck in my head at all?
What?
OD.
A Hideo Kojima game.
What do you mean?
Yes.
They spent, like, how long talking about that?
Oh, it was
8 minutes.
It was a while, yeah. And then, like, all the trailer said to me was, okay, there's people talking with, like, weird eye things going on. I don't know anything about the plot beyond that. I know Hideo Kojima's attached, and I know this is apparently the game that he was working with Xbox Studios on. And despite it just being a nothing trailer about a game that I have no reason to care about, yes, it definitely got its time in the spotlight.
Well, we got to let Geoff Keighley's best friend Hideo Kojima talk about the project that we otherwise know basically nothing about from that trailer, because all we did was see people talking, a bunch of logos, Kojima's logo, the Xbox logo. Get excited now, please.
Like, at what point did Hideo Kojima just become this, like, auteur prize developer for, like, studios to say, we have a Kojima game? Like, he seems like kind of to be almost the modern John Romero in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, everything's weird about it.
I guess you could say that there were shades of it while he was still at Konami during, like, the later Metal Gear Solid titles, but I think the turning point was definitely, like, after he left. And once and with all the stuff with Death Stranding, which by all accounts, from what I know, is a good game. Like, this isn't me criticizing the game or saying anything about the game, because I don't want to talk about stuff like that for games I haven't played. I don't think that's fair. But you could definitely tell, oh, Norman Reedus is here. Like, oh, we're trying to build up the star power. The Silent Hills thing that got a lot of great reception got canceled, and that built the clout even further. That sort of built up again and again and again to the point that we have to the thing that we have now, where we have Death Stranding, we had a sequel to Death Stranding, we have OD, we got these sort of big games, funded by these big companies with these big stars and with these other big collaborations. Like, Jordan Peele is helping with OD, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you could definitely say, now he has this big clout. And also, just Geoff Keighley and Kojima are friends. So Geoff Keighley loves giving Kojima time to talk about his project and show it, even if that time would have been better spent for other things. But we'll get to that later. So,
is Geoff Keighley friends with Hideo Kojima? I had no idea about this.
I thought they were friends, or at the very least, Geoff Keighley really likes Hideo Kojima. At least that was always my impression. I thought they were friends. I apologize if I'm wrong.
They'd mention it more?
What I think about Kojima is that he is, like, when you see that it's a Hideo Kojima game, like, just that maybe catchphrase is a weird word, but just that what's is, I would say, strangely appealing about that is that it can mean kind of anything. It is guaranteed that it has celebrity in it with like revolutionary mocap. That's like the only guarantee. But then it can be like, I don't know, it can be old people fighting on a rooftop. It can be Norman Reedus carrying stuff and building zip lines, and it can be PT. So he's nothing if not imaginative and slightly unpredictable, which has me at least a little bit intrigued about OD, because it can be pretty much anything.
That's fair, and like, I think this was clearly meant to be like the prestige announcement of the show, but I think the actual biggest announcement of the show is probably the towards the end revealing Monster Hunter Wilds.
You could tell why they saved that one for the end. I'm not even like a big Monster Hunter person, but like, come on, that's gonna get an extreme amounts of hype.
Oh yeah, it did, and it has. Like, and I mean, I'm hyped for it. I love Monster Hunter. Do either of you ever play Monster Hunter? I know you just said that you're not big on it, but
I tried. Maybe this is because I played back when it was like we were still in like Monster Hunter 4. But Monster Hunter is was a very slow, deliberate action game. I'm very impatient, so that's sort of where a lot of the disconnect lies. I know that a lot of the new weapon types and other new abilities have sort of sped up the game, and they've also gone for more ambitious open world scopes, which could potentially draw an interest. So now at this point, it's a time thing where it's like, maybe I'll get into it someday. And hey, there are a lot of people I know that play it, so it's not like I wouldn't be able to find people to play Monster Hunter with. But I just haven't had the time to do so.
I haven't played Monster Hunter at all, but I'm extremely happy for the fans of the franchise. I felt a big second-hand joy of that announcement.
I get that, yeah. I guess I'll kind of have to speak a bit about it since I'm the designated Monster Hunter fan in this group. What they showed, it looks like the previous game, Rise, its new gimmick was that you have a dog you can ride, and also kind of these like Spider-Man almost abilities. But it looks like they're at least retaining the idea of the dog with like a little rideable monster that can fly and whatnot. So that was cool to see. You kind of mentioned it was a slow grind. I'm hoping they do take a lot of lessons from Rise, where they kind of just it didn't have loading zones. It had like an open area for you to go into, and basically any hunt you could finish within 10 minutes, like once you had to know what you were doing. So I kind of hope they bring back that kind of just snappiness. I do know some people preferred the more like cinematic approach of world and how they put more emphasis on world traversal and everything like that. But I just want to fight me some monsters. Like, that's what I want. All right, so yeah, that was like there was one other announcement that I thought was very interesting to me, and prior to the event, Sega had kind of been hyping up the Game Awards. They'd sent out like special envelopes saying like, I don't remember what it was, but it was like, look forward to the Game Awards this year, to like a bunch of influencers. And like, it was weird. In particular, they had sent them to like some like fighting community influencers. So a lot of people were thinking it was going to be like a Virtua Fighter revival. And then we got a trailer, and it was basically like, hey, we're working on basically every prominent Genesis through Dreamcast era non-Sega or non-Sonic series.
That's cool. Like, that's very cool.
Yeah. So they had called out Jet Set Radio, Shinobi, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, and Crazy Taxi, I believe, were the ones they showed.
Is this part of that whole super game initiative that they've been like sort of mentioning in like their like, not their press releases, in like their financials over the past few months? Because I think Jet Set Radio and Crazy Taxi, I believe, were mentioned as part of those concepts. I don't remember them mentioning anything about Shinobi or Streets of Rage or Golden Axe, but I remember loose mentions of that being the case, which did kind of make this reveal a little less surprising to me.
That's what I was wondering it was, but I guess that's still like a separate thing. I think these are just we're making games in these series. I think that's all the announcement was.
I mean, there's not much to say because we've gotten a collective, 30 seconds of footage for all of these. This is basically them saying, hey, we're making these games. There's gameplay. Shinobi looks absolutely gorgeous. Jet Set Radio looks like Jet Set Radio. I really got to try Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. I'm hoping that the 3D revivals of Streets of Rage and Golden Axe are better than prior attempts at 3D revivals of those games. There's always fun potential for 3D action games / beat 'em ups, so I hope they're good in that regard. Crazy Taxi looks like Crazy Taxi, but with new graphics. And these are all positives, don't get me wrong. These are all things that I hope are good. But obviously, you know, we got so little other than just saying, hey, we are making them. We promise. Look, I think as we get more information about these games in the future, we'll have more to say and more to talk about. Also, didn't Streets of Rage already have a revival a few years ago? We just got Streets of Rage 4. I hear that game's really good. I want to play it, but nice. More Streets of Rage. This kind of Streets of Rage 5 then?
I'm not familiar with Streets of Rage, so I can't comment.
All I know is that Streets of Rage 4, the visuals are done by the same folks who did the remake of Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, and that was a really gorgeous game. And likewise, Streets of Rage 4 is gorgeous hand-drawn game. So even though I've only played the first Streets of Rage, I'd love to play 4 at some point. And apparently got some pretty extensive like DLC support too. So maybe if I can make the time for another beat 'em up, maybe I'll get to that one.
Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about the announcements, but this was probably one of the more controversial Game Awards in recent memory, I think. There were a few things that had made people pretty upset, even going into it. There was classifying like Dave the Diver as an indie game, even though it's produced by Nexon, which is like one of the largest video game companies in the world. And in particular, I know like one of the sore spots was like being very eager to play people off the stage and keep the show going. And it seemed to like really cast a pallor on the event, so I figured we could talk a bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you wrapped it up in 30 seconds, because we have to have more time for trailers.
World premiere.
But yeah, it's very telling that a lot of the balance when it came to who was allowed to talk, when they were allowed to talk, and the balance between that and all the game trailers was very skewed. And I think it's particularly highlighted this year because of a lot of the stuff going around in the wider industry. You know, a lot of stuff when it came to wider industry layoffs going on that we obviously don't get to speak to, let alone, you know, to put it very, very lightly, current world events that a lot of people probably might have been given the time to speak to. I know, for example, the Venba devs, if they won, they would have actually dedicated a moment to talking about it and to advocating for a ceasefire in Palestine. Just as a small example. But obviously, you know, they didn't get to do that. And even if they did win the award, how much time were they even allotted to quickly talk about any of those things going on, you know, in the world or even just specifically in the industry? So that stuff was very,
well, like even
very wild. Go on, WestEgg.
Even during the like Game of the Year award like acceptance speech, they did it there at the end of the show.
God.
When they were when like the developers were like, yeah, this was like a rough year. We made this was our pandemic game and we lost people and we want to like say some like words about them and like other things, and they started getting played off.
Yeah, imagine that happening at any other major award show. Imagine that happening at the Oscars, the best director or, you know, best film of the year or any of that, only getting 30 seconds to a minute to speak, you know? That would have been seen as shameful because it doesn't value the people who, you know, worked on the game or in that case, the movie. But no, that's what's going on here. at the Game Awards. You know, the people who make the games are getting less of the focus as opposed to big name celebrities or big name devs like Hideo Kojima, who gets a lot of pull with a lot of Hollywood folks and all that kind of stuff. Like, yes, it's fantastic that Hideo Kojima gets to make another weird game with Xbox. It's great that Jordan Peele gets to be involved. Did we need to dedicate that much time in the show to that when we could have had people who won awards talking about their experiences and sharing how they felt about what they've done, you know? And that's just something that it leaves kind of a bad taste in my mouth. I always thought that the Game Awards always did a really poor job of balancing being both winter E3 and an award show, seeing how rapid fire we go through awards. And this year hasn't really changed my opinions, and it's arguably only solidified them. Not to say that there isn't value in a games award show, but I have critiques of how the Game Awards handles what it does.
To put things into perspective, they had an actor come out. I don't even remember what he was plugging, but he had a broken leg or something, and more time was given to him to talk about his broken leg and how getting old sucks and whatnot than any winner got for their acceptance speech.
Yeah, what blows my mind is that I don't know if it's true, because a lot of people were saying that, they're overcorrecting because Christopher Judge had his 8-minute speech, which was like a fun thing back then. I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is because of the amount of ads and announcements had to take a lot of, because this show was longer than I thought it would be, at least, and I think, don't quote me on it, because I think it was longer than last year, and last year got a lot of thumbs up for being shorter than 2021. So people were like, Game Awards are better now because 2022 was shorter and this year was not shorter. But what's weird to me is that there's this irony that they shortened the award speeches because they got a long award speech last year, and yet the guy who had the long award speech gets to joke about his long award speech for longer than the actual award speeches, which is so weird that they have like this almost like self-awareness that, it was a long speech, so we should shorten the speeches now. But to me, that highlights the very real issue, to play off what you said about the guy with the broken leg, is that there were a lot of presenters who talked longer than the acceptance speeches, and to me that's like on borderline unacceptable. And just like the people who were presenting, like they brought on Matthew McConaughey. I don't even know his last name, but I should know his last name because it should be an industry figure that I, as an enthusiast of the video game medium, should know about. But instead it's someone that is called Matthew something that is like not, he's a celebrity, right?
Yeah, just an actor.
Yeah, so something that was particularly egregious to me was when Tears of the Kingdom had won Best Adventure Game, I believe. And like Eiji Aonuma went up for his speech, and he had a translator with him. So like he had to speak, and then the translator had to speak, and they were like already cutting him off like when the translator had just begun translating what Aonuma had said. And it's just like, that's incredibly disrespectful to me. Like, I was actually like a bit angry about that.
You should be. It really, again, it's just designed to show that the Game Awards ends up putting way more priority on showing trailers and showing off celebrities and a lot of more prominent folks than letting people speak about the games that they've worked on. Obviously, Aonuma is a producer, not a director or anything like that. But even so, he's had a hand in the game. It would make sense to give him the room to talk, to actually celebrate the things that we're nominating and doing. But no, you have stuff like this. You have the many rapid fire awards that don't lead to any speech. It's just, here you go, here you go, here you go. Again, it was always felt to me that the Game Awards has prioritized the glitz of an award show and the idea of, hey, let's add in a bunch of trailers to get the gamers to keep watching this stuff.
Exactly.
That, again, it's kind of it tries to be both an award show and a winter E3. And as a winter E3, it's gotten better. The pacing of things. Even though I didn't watch Game Awards this year, seeing the trailers after the fact, yeah, they had a pretty good selection of stuff. But if you're watching the Game Awards primarily for these announcements, you have to sit through not just these award speeches, which I guess you don't really need to sit through because they're only 30 seconds long, 30 seconds to a minute now. But you have to watch Matthew McConaughey talk about stuff. You have to watch Timothée Chalamet talk about stuff. You have to see, Hideo Kojima and Jordan Peele talk about their thing for all of this. You get to see this weird sort of skit with the Muppets now again. So as an E3 sort of replacement, it's not ideal because you have a lot of filler to get through. And if you're here for an award show, this isn't really going to get you much of that either because a good chunk of the awards are skipped through, or at least go very quickly. And then the other part of the awards is you got cut off awards speeches, right? So it really feels like it wants to be the Oscars. And I saw this comparison from somewhere else. So let me not take credit for this. But someone said that we could let the Game Awards be the MTV the MTV Music Awards equivalent, and and then obviously things like the DICE Awards and stuff like that would be stuff to pay more attention to in the sense of celebrating the industry. And again, we could talk about how good the Oscars are, or the Grammys, or any of those big award shows. There's definitely things to critique with those as well. Like, I am not lost on the fact, the fuck the Oscars speech. I am not lost on. Don't forget to watch watch the trailer from him, Game Awards winner for It Takes Two, for your new Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons remake. Very happy to see that. But it has its own problems as an award show, and in some ways, it's rougher than something like the Oscars or something like that. Again, problems with all of them, but you can definitely see that the Game Awards is sort of, it feels like it's struggling under its own weight almost.
Yeah.
I think kind of at the root of all of this is just a weird insecurity about the place of games in overall culture.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I thought too.
A lot of it's not even just like the entire industry. A lot of it's kind of specifically just like Western games media. And it's like they want to try and get legitimacy from the film industry, which is several times smaller than the games industry. But there's just that inferiority complex that they can't seem to get over. And so they emulate things as much as they can. And it's just very frustrating.
Yeah, one thing that's caught my attention as well is that, to address Geoff Keighley directly, I know he's not the be-all end-all. Or maybe a little bit be-all end-all of the entire thing. But it feels to me like he has no trust in game developers and gaming artists to be memorable on stage. Because I think that's why he brings in like presenters from other industries, or presenters who tries to be funny. I did not find any presenter this year to be funny at all. Presenters are rarely funny overall.
Speaking of presenters, where was Reggie?
I have no idea.
They showed him. I don't think he ever actually presented.
Okay,
sorry.
Reggie is the golden exception. I was. Thank you for mentioning him.
But he wasn't there, so it was even worse. He was there, but he didn't speak, so it was worse.
Yeah, maybe he had backstage info about the 30-second rule and decided to not present out of integrity.
That'd be funny.
But as I was saying, so it feels like Geoff is like, okay, game developers are not able to be memorable on stage, so I have to bring up presenters and stuff. But the thing I have to say is that game developers are good on stage, interesting on stage, can give great speeches, can be great presenters. Reggie is a perfect example. Joseph Fares also is a good example. I even feel like Neil Druckmann was nicer to see on stage than any Hollywood celebrity. And and this is like acceptance speeches can be sometimes the best parts of TGA. I really, some of my memory, like, do you remember like Corey Barlog cracking up? Do you remember like the Disco Elysium people rattling out books they were inspired by? I thought that was awesome. And I think it ties back to what you said about the inferiority complex in the in the approach that, okay, we don't have enough. I think the faith is the issue here. We don't have enough faith in the game industry to carry this on its own. So we have to piggyback out of other industries to sort of gain legitimacy. That I think that the game industry is capable of gaining that legitimacy on its own. You just have to trust it.
Yeah, and to sort of like jump in on that point too, it almost feels like there's not enough faith, not just in the game developers who are winning awards, but even the fact that this is an award show in general. So we got to hold people's interest by showing off new trailers. We have to talk about all these world premieres that we have, and that has to be the focus. And again, look, notice how we've had much more to say about those world premieres, and we were going pretty rapid fire through them than a lot of the stuff than a lot of the specific award speeches or anything at the actual award show. Again, it really can feel like the Game Awards is more so, hey, here's a bunch of cool game trailers with a subpar award show sort of attached to it. And I don't want to bemoan any of the hard work that anyone has put into both behind the scenes and in front of the cameras, but again, whenever I see stuff from the Game Awards, whether I've watched it live or not, and this is probably the first year where I've decided not to because I didn't think it would be very interesting, and I've sat through these other shows and I haven't had much interesting to say or think about them because of a lot of the stuff with the pacing and the trailers and stuff like that. It almost feels like there's not enough trust in that games can have an award show. So instead, we got to do the trailers. We got to do the celebs. We got to do all of these other things. And I think ultimately, things would be a lot more interesting, at least to me, if we had a good award show and a good Winter E3. And again, there are a lot, we can talk about, say, the DICE Awards as an example of another gaming-centric award show, just as one example, right? So it really does show that although the Game Awards gets a lot of the pomp and the circumstances, there's something always I find weird about it. I say this with the caveat that, hey, if I happen to work on a game that get nominated for a Game Awards, yes, I would still probably go. Keep that in mind. But again, just because of that doesn't mean I don't have issues with how certain things are handled, and I don't expect a lot of those to be addressed because I think the Game Awards just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger each year, but I do hope there is at least some change or some shift in direction that we can see either from the awards themselves or maybe how we talk about games or what we choose in the industry. Yeah.
All right. So we did also today want to talk about the recent announcement that there is going to be a Legend of Zelda live action film. Nintendo is partnering with Sony to produce it and distribute it. It's Westball is attached as the director, co-produced by Miyamoto and Avi Arad. So just kind of when you saw the announcement, when you saw on Twitter the "This is Miyamoto" and like it went into the announcement, what were your immediate reactions?
Someone texted me and was like, "I hope you didn't die seeing the Zelda news, Irene." I was like, Zelda news! Tears of the Kingdom DLC, to the Zelda, and it's a movie. But I was really, really surprised, and then I was surprised. Then I had my concern dip when I saw that it would be live action, as many of us had, because I know that a lot of people in the discourse has voiced concerns about it being live action and pointed to Miyazaki influences in Breath of the Wild's art direction and how that would fit a little bit more. Those are the directors, and the Maze Runner slaps, so I'm excited.
So, I did see someone on Twitter say, like, if you see a tweet from Nintendo of Japan that begins with "This is Miyamoto," you know the world is about to change. I think that was Zelman on Twitter, and I really liked that. But yeah, like I think we're currently going through the I don't want to say the stages of grief or whatever, but basically what we went through with Mario being produced by Illumination. Like the ups and downs of this exists, oh no, they're making it, but what if, and all of that.
And well, we all know how that turned out. We sure got a movie called the Super Mario Brothers movie, all right.
I enjoyed that movie.
I've gone through the stages of grief with that movie of having a really bad time in the theater watching it, to thinking it was decent, to watching it again and be like, this could have been better. And I've been through it. So my expectations for Zelda are going to be very, very similar. Zelda definitely has more story to pull from, so they can do something with it. But ultimately, I'm more interested in saying, hey, what does West Ball and the actors and the writers and all that, what do they want to do with this material? Is it going to be interesting? Are we going to get something out of it other than, oh, this is Zelda, but it's a movie? Because if I wanted a good Zelda experience, I mean, I could just play the game. You know, the games are still going to be there. They're still going to be excellent. Is the movie going to be up to that same standard? I'm not sure.
Like, with any piece of media, you can say that's adapted from a source. You can always just say, why not go to the source? Like, I do think new interpretations are valid, and, like, especially going to new mediums and trying to reach a new audience. So, like, I'm not going to kind of, like, raise the flag on that necessarily.
Yeah, I'm not inherently opposed to a Zelda movie or even a live-action Zelda movie. You can make I think that especially when it comes to adaptation, you can make a wide variety of ideas work, a wide variety of takes on a character work or on a property or any sort of media. And, you know, we've gotten a wide mix of that. Speaking of just this year, beyond just the Mario movie, look at the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie was a really interesting adaptation of Barbie as a concept and how to do it. And they ended up making a really fun and stylish movie out of that concept that still got to speak to some more impactful themes, you know, got to be this really interesting coming of age story. So obviously you can do anything and generally make it work. So yeah, a lot of the big thing is like, hey, what do they want? And we have some thoughts from the director, which we'll get to later, which is going to be nice to talk about. But yeah, a lot of it is going to be, hey, what do you want to do with this movie? Are you going, you know, is it going to be, are you going to make it interesting? You know, are you going to make it just not feel like by the numbers? Because if they can achieve that and you can really feel that, oh, they really wanted to do something with this property, really do something interesting with this material, then I think we're in for a good movie. But my expectations are sort of low. If it's great, it'll be great. I will see it. And if it's not great, it's not going to be the end of the world, you know?
That's fair.
Yeah.
I did want to... Okay, so we have a question from Chocolate Super, which is really the question, like the question everyone has,
Yeah.
which is, would you all prefer this to be an adaptation of one of the games, like, say, Ocarina of Time, the movie, or be something entirely new, like just an original story? And I have my own preferred answer on that, but I'll hold on to it for a moment.
Definitely an original story. I think...
You want an original story? Okay.
I think Zelda games have great stories. Some of the some of the best stories in gaming, but I don't think they lend that well to a Hollywood structure because they're structured a little bit differently. And it's like taking my favorite Zelda story, for example, Wind Waker, and how you frame it when you think about... If I compare it to Lord of the Rings, for example, compare the Shire to Outset Island. And in the Shire, you have this world building, you have these shots, you have Frodo going out, meeting Gandalf and stuff. You could do something similar with Link talking to Ariel, and then the stuff happens with Helmarok King dropping down Tetra. From there, it kind of works, but then it starts to like... The structure of the game is so incompatible with like a standard movie because they're so different mediums. So I think it's just so structurally different. Then you come to like, okay, obviously it's a plot element that Link needs to gather the pearls, but how do you make that interesting that he comes to like Does he have to get all 3 pearls? Because that's like half the movie, unless you do any like super awkward cut downs. And then how do you convey the feeling of like of finally being set out and placing the pearls in the hands of the girls that rises Tower of the Gods, which is an amazing part, I think, of the game, but it would look like dull as bricks in the movie. And there's just so much to cut out in terms of structuring, and it would be so awkward to, I think, strip down some parts. And the more I think about it, the more I try to wrap my head around how would you make Wind Waker work in a traditional linear Hollywood format story with all of its third act dramatic progression. So yeah, totally an original story as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with Irene. I think that if the goal was to adapt a specific Zelda story, I think the better idea would have been a series, like a X number of episodes on TV, whether that's live action or animated or whatever. You do that, and it gives you the time to breathe and to explore a lot of the different settings. Because a lot of game storytelling is something that isn't something that's constrained to an hour and a half or 2 hours, unless we're talking about really older, shorter games. It's something that's spread out, and a lot of it is about the experience of play, exploring these different areas, interacting with these different folks. And I think giving that room to breathe would be ideal for something like a TV show, where you could do, say, 13 half-hour episodes or something like that, even though I know most episode orders are closer to 8 to 10 now, but you get the idea. But having that, and that being the adaptation, have an episode that focuses on this location, an episode that focuses on this location, an episode that focuses on this location or this plot points. Obviously, you would still need to work it for a television medium, but I think that if we're in a specific game adaptation, I can see that working a lot better for a game like Zelda. And even for some of the longer ones, that could be something that you do over a series of seasons. Like, you could have a bunch of short seasons dedicated to a story, like that's a few ones that are themed after Breath of the Wild, and then Tears of the Kingdom, for example, right? Because just how large of a scale that adventure could be, But yeah, for a movie, I don't think they should specifically tether themselves to one specific story. You can take elements from those stories, right? The cool thing with adaptation is that you sort of get to pick and choose which aspects you want to show. So if you want to take a little bit of stuff from Ocarina of Time, but maybe, you want to also maybe add in some of the stuff from Breath of the Wild in terms of the NPCs and people are there. Or wait a minute, let's add this character from this, or use this concept or this item from this, rather than having to tie it to a specific game, you can have a lot of freedom to sort of pick and choose what you want to do in order to best service the kind of story you want to tell. So yeah, I don't think they should specifically adapt a game. They can pull elements from a game and sort of try doing some of that storytelling, but I don't think they need to be beholden to specifically tell the story of a specific game. I mean, the Mario movie didn't do that. I mean, it had the basic concepts from things like the cartoons and the early 80s backstory with Brooklyn. We had Mario Kart stuff. We had Donkey Kong stuff. We had enemies and ideas from a bunch of the different stuff. And that was part of the fun, seeing what they chose to put in, what they chose to save for later, in order to build that stuff. So in that regard, I hope the Zelda movies take a similar approach.
Okay, so I'm going to be the dissenting opinion, and I think that they will, and that they in fact should, do an adaptation of a game. The thing to remember, what you just said, if you want to have a deep dive, long form, of course we want that. We're the fans, we want to luxuriate in the lore that we know, we want to see things as grand and whatnot as possible. As far as the accounting for the project goes, we're already marks in the wall. They already know we're going to go see it. They're trying to go well beyond that. And something like that could potentially be alienating for a general audience. I don't love that idea, but that's kind of my interpretation of how that goes. So as far as what they would adapt if given the choice, I think there's only 4 logical games that they could. And it would be Original Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and Breath of the Wild. I think everything else has too much context that's wrapped around other games in the series. Those are all kind of like the jumping on points. And the games that aren't those four are set up to like be sequels for the future. And if I had my choice of which one, it would be A Link to the Past. Because I think A Link to the Past is the foundation of modern Zelda. Basically where everything comes from. Truth be told, I would divide it into two movies, but again, that's me wanting to like luxuriate on extra long Zelda stuff that I love. But it would basically be divided between like the beginning when like Link wakes up, gets the message, goes like storms the castle, rescues Zelda, and it would end with basically him getting the Master Sword, going back, storming the castle, Zelda disappearing into the Dark World, and like him defeating Agaheim, and then like it would end with like him in the Dark World. It's just like crazy new large scope. And then the second movie would be like kind of his, like going through the Dark World adventure. That's how I would do it, because I think that makes a satisfying narrative. It has intrigue. Like I think Link to the Past has kind of an underrated story in that regard, with like its kind of specific moments. That's what I would like to see, given that what they're doing as far as adapting a movie.
I could see that potentially working. I mean, when I was thinking in my head of how you would adapt a lot of these, if you were to adapt, I think, yeah, having you doing it over two movies could potentially do that. Like, you could do that with, for example, Ocarina of Time. If you wanted to do a first movie that follows primarily the child story, and then the sequel movie, being, hey, this is what happens sort of, during the adult timeline and the actual ending of the game. Get enough mileage out of the actors that you can do sort of a 1-2-1-2 for that. That's something that I think you could do. I also think the first Zelda game is so sparse in its story that, yeah, you can adapt that as a movie and still be like completely free, because really at that point you're just adapting the base concept of Zelda. You got a kid. Or I'm assuming they're gonna make Link like a young adult for this, right? Him going on an adventure to save the princess or save the kingdom from Ganon. That doing Zelda 1 gives you a lot of freedom to sort of like pick and choose what you want to do. So it would be more. So that would honestly, I see that you would probably be more of an adaptation of the series in general. But one thing I think about. And this, I'm not sure what their goals are going to be from this movie, but I imagine that they want this film to be the start of a franchise, right? Where you start a movie here and then you make sequels and sequels and sequels off of that movie. And I think there are certain ones where you could do that. Like if you did A Link to the Past, whether that's one movie or two movies, and then, we'll adapt Link's Awakening next, for example. Okay, you get to use the same Link. You get to use a lot of that same stuff. Or in the hypothetical, you did something related to like Breath of the Wild. Okay, we'll do Breath of the Wild, and then we'll do Tears of the Kingdom. We still get to use a lot of the same cast, right? But I wonder if that is something that they're going to set up with in mind, because for us, when we think about Zeldas, Nintendo, when they're making their stories, are very comfortable to go, okay, yeah, this is a new Link in Zelda, new stuff and all that kind of stuff. Which you might think of that in Hollywood terms, and they're going like, wait a minute. So every couple of entries, we're just going to be replacing the cast. Each one's effectively going to be a reboot. And I could either see Hollywood people going, no. If we're building bankable actors, we want to keep them on for longer. Or alternatively, Hollywood producers, again, Avi Arad's known for work on Spider-Man, going, wait a minute, we have free reign to just like reboot the series whenever we want and have loose associations with it and still have our big money-making franchise sold. Cha-ching. Let's keep making those movies. So I think to be part of the deciding factor for whether or not they're going to adapt a specific game, or if they are going to like make a more general adaptation that may be a game adaptation but might be looser, because maybe they might be thinking of, hey, what do we want to retain with our cast and our writing? What do we want to retain? Or are we okay with like having these be a 3-movie, and then we'll do another 3 movies, and we'll just replace as we want? There can be a lot of freedom, but there could also be a lot of, wait a minute, no, we built up this star, let's keep that star. So I'm very curious to see what they'll do.
I mean, to me, like, the reason why I'm favoring doing game adaptations is is basically because of the sequel potential. It's, yes, we have baked-in sequels that people have built-in fan bases for specific to those games, and we can continue making more movies based off of those. And if we need to change up the cast between entries, we can. People will think it's like a cool, ongoing, long story that spans generations, which is kind of part of the appeal of the regular games anyway. That's kind of why I see them going in that direction.
You got any thoughts, Irene, on that?
I think West made a pretty good case for A Link to the Past, as if they would go a game adaptation, they could go with A Link to the Past, because I do think...
Oh, they won't, but yeah.
if they won't, but if, like, let's just say, if, like, in a theoretical sense it will happen, A Link to the Past is a good choice, I think, because it has a significant framework, and it has some very memorable scenes with the Aghanim, seeing him and Zelda. Mm-hmm. But then you have all the dungeon stuff that is like not connected to story whatsoever, which is why I hesitate when I talk about the Wind Waker, because like all of the dungeon stuff has story elements to it that is important to the overall context. But with Link to the Past, you can cut that completely and come up with like new scenarios that fits the framework of getting the stuff, the MacGuffins, if you so will, and getting the Master Sword. So you can work around it and add new scenarios, but keep the A Link to the Past framework. So, yeah, it's a good idea, actually, to keep A Link to the Past as a framework. I think that could pay off.
Okay, so as far as... So the movie's happening. Like, whether we like it or not, the movie's happening. Who would you like to see in the movie, like, as far as cast as Link, Zelda, Ganondorf, whoever?
Honestly, for Link and Zelda, get two unknowns.
I agree.
Yeah.
Get people and have them grow into the roles over a series of movies, and just like build them up into like that. Don't try to get someone who's necessarily marketable for those characters, especially if we're doing something that's close to the games, where a lot of the times we focus on like a younger Link and a younger Zelda, as opposed to some of the later games in the series where, okay, now they're like teens and adults. I could envision a take on Zelda where they actually do focus on like sort of young teen actors to start, and then over a series of 2 or 3 or more movies, they get to grow from sort of the young child Link and Zelda to, you know, teenage adult Link and Zelda, and have that being told over the story. And you could even keep things fresh with, even if you were still using the same world, by introducing new villains or focusing on different things. Imagine a first story where Ganondorf's the villain, and then a sequel or a third movie, or maybe a second movie where there's like another villain, and then it's revealed at the end in like the credits, or in like the post-credit scene or something, that, oh, Ganondorf was pulling the strings, but actually he's Ganon now. And then in the third movie, it's about dealing with Ganon like once and for all, at least for that Link and Zelda. Like, I can see a potential trilogy being done, something like that. But yeah, don't focus on big Hollywood names, at least for Link and Zelda. If you want to like fill out the supporting cast or the villains with some more bigger names, you know, that's fine. You know, I think you could make that work. But yeah, for Link and Zelda specifically, don't focus on getting a big name. Just get someone who would be very suitable for whatever their vision of Link and Zelda is, because obviously how they're going to characterize Link is still probably like a big question mark right now, at least for us. And they can go in a variety of directions. I don't think they need to keep him silent, by the way.
Yeah, he'll talk.
That's not a problem. Just make an interesting character out of the concept. Keep the fact that that his main big trait is that he's courageous and wants to like help people, and like I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add other than I agree with just I don't care about the individuals they get so long as they can perform the role and look like how they should. Like, we actually, Missing No actually asked if we think Tingle will be in the movie and who would play him. Shia LaBeouf. There.
I don't think they're going to touch Tingle with like a
they won't
pull. Absolutely
that'd
not.
be my answer. That's the only cast. That's my only casting call. Shia LaBeouf is Tingle.
I mean, they have to have some sort of comedic relief character. Or not
Yeah, I
have
agree.
to have, but I'm certain that they will have to have. Or, there will be a comedic relief character for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would be very surprised if they wanted to pull the Tingle button this soon, given how not great Tingle's reception has been, in particular in North America. And I imagine North America is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest market for the movie.
For sure.
So I don't think they'll specifically pull Tingle.
No,
hey, Nintendo, you have a chance to rehabilitate Tingle's image in the West. You know, you got a few years until this movie comes out. Yeah, but you're probably gonna make sequels. You can do it.
I mean, honestly, I think Tingle hate's kind of like been overblown for a while, and I don't think it's really as prevalent as it used to be. But again, I would save Tingle for Majora's Mask anyway, because like that's kind of his point. He's just like this weird, bizarre character in the weird, bizarre world.
Yeah, good, definitely a good point.
Oh, and I did want to. Chocolate Super actually did have a follow-up question who asked if it is a standalone entry, what timeline would we hope it takes place in?
Ooh.
And if it's original, I think it doesn't take place in any timeline, or it takes place in like its own thing.
Yeah,
That's just my thought.
Honestly, even if it is an adaptation, don't worry about the timeline.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, just adapt the story of the game. If you want to pull in stuff for the timeline later, like, oh, this caused the split timeline and this stuff's going on here, and the whole Wind Waker thing, or all that stuff, then you could do it. For that first entry in particular, don't worry about it. Just adapt the story the way you want, whether it's a more original thing based off the franchise or a specific game. Just do it and just focus on that.
That's one of the reasons why I did kind of also favor Link to the Past as the ideal choice, because it is fairly straightforward in that regard. You don't have any time splitting or travel or anything like that.
And it's also shafted aside to the downfall timeline that no one cares about.
Yeah, imagine trying to explain that to like a movie-going audience. Well, after the results of this movie, you know how, one timeline he won, and then he went back, and we saw that, but did you know that there was a third timeline where Link just died, and he lost, and that's the movie we're watching right now? We're watching that timeline now?
I mean, we did just live through the MCU, which is doing like weird multiversal character revivals and stuff through like the extended media, which, to be fair, is because it's based on comics, which go just hog wild with that anyway. But
yeah, they had the goodwill to build it up over a decade, and even now that's not quite coming home to roost. Where things are overall reception to the MCU as of late has been a lot more mixed, and it almost feels like, and you can sort of see that that they don't really know what they're doing. At least a lot of people, that's the perception. Of course, that's a lot of it also because how they're moving things to TV and all that kind of stuff, and that's sort of the shift between having it feeling more like homework. I think a Zelda can avoid that, but also just again, I hope they don't even think about it. Just make the movie, and if you want to touch on it later, go for it. But just make the movie you want and go for it.
Okay. So we haven't really heard much about the movie since it was announced. Aside from, we did get a line from Westbell, who said they're aiming for like a live-action Miyazaki kind of feel to the movie. To me, that's kind of a nothing statement. It's kind of just a yes, we know you like this thing, so we're going to say we're doing that. I don't think that's just kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, I think it's like the one thing that might say to me is that, they're not just trying to ape Lord of the Rings. They're not.
That was the point. Yeah,
we're not specifically going for that. But live action Miyazaki, like you said, I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean you're going to be pulling like the story?
It's colorful and like whimsical.
Yeah, is it just colorful and whimsical? Because I'm assuming that's what you mean. But in that regard, why is it going to be a live action like Ghibli style movie, right? Because that just tells, because similar to what Irene brought up with all the comparisons to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to works like, for example, Princess Mononoke, a lot of us are like, wait, beyond the fact that you want to make a live action movie and that's maybe for marketability or if they fit your skills better, why live action Miyazaki? I think the one thing I hope with this, and I don't know how much we can say about this at this point, is that, yes, the comparisons to Miyazaki can potentially be promising, but if I wanted Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli Zelda movie, then yeah, I would love to see Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli Zelda movie and not someone trying to necessarily ape or imitate the style. Again, obviously imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. You got to take your influences from a variety of different points. Let me not say that. But like, I really want to see what Wes Bell wants to do with Zelda. Why does he want to adapt this, and what does he have to say when it comes to adapting the story? What are his priorities? That I'm interested in way more than just, okay, it's going to be like this other thing you like. So
I do want to give Wes Bell at least some props, because from what I've seen, it does seem like he is like an actual longtime fan of the series. And so he may have some valid like interpretations and thoughts and attachments. Like, there was a tweet circulating around from 2010 where he said, like, hey, since I know I'll never have the chance to do it, the next mocap CG like prestige movie like Avatar should be The Legend of Zelda. He said that in 2010.
Oh, how the turntables.
Oh, how the turntables.
Yeah, so that was really funny to me, but I mean, I don't even hate that idea. Like, I think, like, obviously any live-action Zelda, especially if they are bringing in, like, the Gorons and the Zora and stuff, there will be, like, all sorts of CGI mocap, whatever.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you got it. I mean, if they can get some practical effects for some of those, that'd be great, but there's a budget. I understand. But yeah, again, if we can see that Wes Bell or the actors or the writers interested in the material, and that gets the show, and I don't mean interest in the fact that, yeah, of course they want to make a Zelda movie, like, yes, like, obviously, but like, if we can see like what things he gets to bring to the table in terms of what interests him about Zelda, and we get to see that on the screen, and it's not just trying to be, oh, this is just an adaptation of Zelda that because of studio mandates or because of what Nintendo or Sony wants, we just got to make it as safe as we can. We're just making this movie to make the movie and have it out there. That's the kind of thing I'd be really interested. Again, I'm not expecting like auteur level art here, but you can make pop art that's very interesting and very fun. I love the Barbie movie from this year, right? That is pop art, but it's fun pop art that really knows what it wants to be, has a great sense of style, has a great fun story, and all that kind of stuff. And no, I'm not expecting Wes Bell's The Legend of Zelda to necessarily be on the same level as the Barbie movie, because the Barbie movie was really, really strong. But like something in that vein, in the sense of, hey, I really get to see what Wes Bell's take and what the writer's takes on this material want to be, and it feels interesting in that regard. That idea really excites me. So I'm hoping Wes Bell gets to do that, especially, you know, as you mentioned before, we got tweets showing that he's a fan. You know, I want to see that. I want to see that come out, you know, and in the writing, in the visuals, in all of those departments, and that potentially can make me really that alone could make this a really exciting project.
Made me sort of excitement about the live action Miyazaki thing is that, speaking of draw inspiration, if that's what he was referring to, I think two things is that Miyazaki films has really great visual world building with like little details in the background that tells a lot about the mood and the world, and how you can freeze a frame like every now and then and see all these details that makes the world feel believable. And what's interesting is that it has that in common with the Super Mario Brothers movie, because I thought the Super Mario Brothers movie had these like super cool environments and details that made it really feel like it felt like a Mario's world, and it wasn't just a bunch of pipes and blocks here and there. It really felt like it was rich in a way, and I look forward to if the movie can provide some of that philosophy about visual world building and attention to detail in the set pieces. If you like walking down the street and you see like guards in the background with the Din, Faror and Naru symbols on their chest pieces, stuff like that, and small subtle nods here and there too, because Legend of Zelda is rich with symbolism, right? And playing on that symbolistic richness, I think, could make for some really cool visual world building in the movie, and I hope they capitalize on that.
For sure. I could say a lot of things about the Mario movie, but the use of its visuals and a lot of the background callbacks, that was definitely a very high positive, because again, it shows that people really wanted to do that movie and that they got a lot of excitement and got to add those details. So here's hoping we get at least that for Zelda as well.
Yeah, I would say regarding this whole project, I'm cautiously optimistic, which is kind of how I approach the Mario movie as well. There's a few things that I am appreciative of what I've heard. One, like, this movie is also co-produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, just like the Mario movie was. And that, to me, comes with Nintendo's supervision that they're going to at least be very faithful to the visual style and the mechanics of how the world works and, like, various other things like that. Because that, like, for whatever other faults the Mario movie had, like, I felt like it did excel in that regard. And I think that they had succeeded in the Mario movie of basically evoking a sense of joy like the Mario games are supposed to. And I think they're going to try and communicate the feelings of what Zelda provides, which is like a sense of wonder, a sense of grandeur, something like that. I think that's going to be very high priority. So, again, like, I'm going to have to see trailers. I'm going to have to see the movie. But, I don't know. Like, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, same.
All right. Any other thoughts on The Legend of Zelda live-action movie partnered with Sony?
Man, after them really bungling the Mario movie contracts back in the early 2010s, Avi Arad must be feeling pretty good that he got Zelda, doesn't he?
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's funny. I'm seeing a lot of people pointing out the irony that obviously Nintendo's partnering with Sony to make the movie, but like Sony Films is a juggernaut in general. Like, I think they've gotten better with a lot of their more recent productions because they were kind of a joke for a while. But yeah, I appreciate the irony, but I don't think it's anything like that unusual.
Yeah, these companies are sort of like, massive, so there's a lot of different arms of them. No, Sony's not going to buy Nintendo. No, we're not going to get Mario on PlayStation unless you count me putting in my Blu-ray copy of the Super Mario Brothers movie into my PlayStation 5. It's going to be fine, guys. Where it's not things aren't going to be that weird. We're just going to get a movie. It's going to be good. And speaking of which, Nintendo was pretty smart to maintain most of the ownership for both the Mario movie and this new Zelda movie, if you see
for
the
sure.
notes. So definitely, especially if they want to build up their media empire, that's definitely a good move.
They don't want a Spider-Man situation. So that'll do it for today's discussion. I'd like to thank my fellow Discussion Club members for their participation today, including those of you who sent us questions. If you're interested in continuing the discussion or sending us questions of your own, please be sure to find this podcast companion thread on Famiboards.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to review or leave us some feedback. We're on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. And share this episode with someone you think who would enjoy it. It would really help us grow. Thanks again, everyone, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.